And the presence of a strong armoured force in the form of Panzer Group 4 gave Army Group North some much-needed tank support during the headlong advance into Russia. Nevertheless, the rudimentary road system of the Baltic states and northern Russia played havoc with the tanks. Right at the beginning of the Russian campaign, the Germans experienced the problems which dust can cause in motor vehicles. Tanks sustained severe damage from the dust they stirred up while crossing vast sandy regions. Many tanks had no dust filters, and on those which were equipped, the filters soon became thoroughly clogged. Quartz dust was sucked into engines, which became so ground out that many tanks were rendered unserviceable. In other tanks, the abrasive action of dust reduced engine efficiency and massively increased fuel consumption. The sand roads undoubtedly caused problems. They greatly slowed tanks or trucks. They also caused huge dust clouds which were raised by convoys. These dust clouds frequently provoked air attacks by the surviving aircraft of the Red Air Force. As the Red Air Force regathered its strength, these attacks resulted in serious losses of men, vehicles, and horses. For as long as they were in support of Army Group North, the tanks of Panzer Group 4 played an invaluable role. But even with the panzers, the swift advances of June and July ground to a halt against the tough defences of the Stalin Line, which were encountered in August and early September. While the fortifications of the frontier districts left much to be desired, there were still extensive fortifications to be overcome deep within Mother Russia. Although they did not form a solid, unbroken line of fortifications like the French Maginot Line, the heavily defended Stalin Line, or the Leningrad Line as the German forces in the north knew it, was a formidable series of prepared defences. Areas of great importance were surrounded with heavy fortifications, and the German armoured units driving for Leningrad encountered fortification systems up to 6 miles in depth, including well-positioned earth and concrete bunkers with built-in guns and other heavy weapons. There were also concrete pillboxes with disappearing armoured cupolas for artillery and machine guns. A speedy elimination of these strong defences with the means available to a force designed for mobile warfare was extremely difficult. The area of Krasnoyarsk, south of Leningrad, had been developed according to sound Soviet defensive principles and was effectively turned into an outlying fortress for the defense of Leningrad. During early September 1941, it presented great difficulties to the advance of the German forces. Krasnoyarsk blocked all highways and railroads leading to Leningrad from the south, and constituted the main bulwark of Russian resistance. The Russians defended it persistently. Repeated attacks by several infantry divisions were repulsed. It was only taken in the course of a general attack on the Leningrad Line, and after bitter pillbox fighting in the area immediately surrounding Krasnoyarsk. Only the flexible leadership of battle-tested armoured forces, attacking with great vigour, made it possible to overcome the defence zones which had been set up with a sound knowledge of the latest defence techniques. Within a week, the German 6th Panzer Division had been forced to break through and roll up 12 positions, repel several counterattacks, and take more than 300 heavily fortified bunkers. Like all German operations in Russia, from an early stage it became apparent to the commanders, to the troops, to the high command, that the task they had taken on, and the tasks they may have to take on, were beginning to exceed by far the resources to hand. In general terms, the forces were adequate for the immediate tasks which Army Group North had to fulfill. It was a very accomplished command, and it did manage to achieve what Hitler ordered to be done, which was to seize the Baltic states, establishing them as a base for further operations in Russia, and move right up to Leningrad. From October 1941 onwards, Hitler tended to vacillate between striking into the Ukraine as the main strategic objective and attacking Moscow, which was the nerve center of Soviet Russia. Army Group North, therefore, came a poor third in terms of allocation of resources. It is fair to suggest that Hitler's High Command failed to provide von Leeb with enough resources, which in turn prevented Army Group North from achieving its objective of the capture of Leningrad. In the north, the fighting for the Stalin Line proved to be an attritional nightmare, with German casualties soon mounting to First World War levels. The Russians were very adept at preparing inhabited places for defense. In a short time, a village would be converted into a little fortress. Wooden houses had well-camouflaged gun ports almost flush with the floor. Their interiors were reinforced with sandbags or earth. Observation slots were cut into roofs, and bunkers built into floors, and connected with adjacent houses or outside defences by narrow trenches. Although almost all inhabited places were crammed with troops, they seemed deserted to German reconnaissance, since even water and food details were allowed to leave their shelters only after dark. The Russians blocked approach routes with well-camouflaged anti-tank guns, or dug-in tanks. Wrecks of knocked-out tanks were specially favoured for use as observation posts and as emplacements for heavy infantry weapons, and bunkers for living quarters were dug under them. Permanent structures destroyed by artillery fire or aerial bombs were utilised as defence points. The ruins hid weapons and served to strengthen the underlying bunkers. Even the heaviest shelling would not drive the Russians from these positions. They could only be dislodged with hand grenades or flamethrowers in costly hand-to-hand fighting. The Russians, when they did retreat, frequently burned or blasted buildings suitable for housing command posts or other important military installations. Quite often, however, they left castles, former country seats, and other spacious dwellings intact, but only after they had mined the walls in a completely inconspicuous manner with delayed action bombs, which were often set to explode several weeks later. These were meant to blow up entire German headquarters at one time. The possible presence of time bombs in cities, railroad stations, bridges, and other important structures always had to be taken into account in German thinking, exacting a great psychological toll. Entirely new to the Germans was the Russian use of forest fires as a hot weather weapon. In midsummer, when the trees were tinder dry, the Russians attempted to delay German forces advancing on Leningrad by putting forests to the torch. Not only the physical, but the psychological impact of such fires was severe. The crackling of the burning trees, the acrid grey-black smoke, the increasingly unbearable heat, and the feeling of uncertainty put troops under a severe strain.